Hi everyone, and thanks for joining my webinar. Today we are focusing on ways that you can support newcomer youth with refugee background. My name is Leanne Brownell, and I am the HRCE EAL consultant. So thanks again for joining. If you have any questions after the session, please feel free to email me at lbrownell@hrce.ca. All right, so today we're going to focus on ways that we can support newcomer youth with refugee backgrounds. So an overview of today's webinar, we'll look at student backgrounds, the unique issues that they face, and what teachers can do to support them. We'll touch on working with students with refugee background and the importance of perseverance and growth mindset, and what are some appropriate teaching strategies and practices that have high impact when working with students of this background. The three sources that were used to develop this PD was Students with Interrupted Formal Education, Boosting Achievement by Carol Salva, and Supporting Refugee Children by Jan Stewart. I highly recommend all of these books, but specifically the Boosting Achievement and Reaching Students with Interrupted and Minimal Education is a widely recommended resource in the world of EAL, especially if you're supporting secondary students. All right, so we're going to look at student backgrounds. So they come from all over the world. They've experienced war, conflict, natural disasters. Currently, a lot of our students of refugee background do come from Syria, but Nova Scotia does welcome refugees from many other parts of the world. So we've got lots from Somalia, Eritrea, Sudan, Afghanistan, Congo, Uganda, and so on. While students from the Ukraine are technically seeking refuge and fleeing war and conflict, they technically aren't coming as students of refugee background. Technically, they're coming on temporary permits, but nevertheless, they have experienced awful living situations and trauma, but they have not lived in a refugee camp. So there is some similarities, but some differences between students coming from Ukraine and the other countries. Their circumstances may have caused interruptions in their formal education. It might be limited or it may be non-existent. So we do have students entering our school system that have never attended schools. They may not have literacy needs in their home language. They're likely to have experienced trauma and have suffered great loss. So they will have different social and emotional needs. When students come at the secondary level, especially the high school level, they are at great risk of dropping out or aging out. And we will talk about that further into the webinar we get. They may have attended school, but on a more casual or infrequent basis. And what their school might have looked like is very different than how formal school is in Canada. So it may not have been taught by a qualified teacher. It may have been a huge number of students with one teacher. So different students that have attended school will have different experiences that they're bringing with them. Some of the following experiences that I'm going to touch on are something that you and I would take for granted and make assumptions that they would know how to do, but it's not necessarily true. Something such as working with a pencil, having colors, learning how to draw, working with scissors and glue. These are all very new. What comes kind of intuitively to students in working with math manipulatives is a foreign concept to them. So we have to be kind of mindful of our expectations and making assumptions. Technology is new to a lot of students. Chromebooks, having iPads and calculators, they may not have experienced this. Chances are by the time they've come into the classroom, some of the older ones would know how to navigate a cell phone, but not necessarily. And Chromebooks would be a new concept for them, having a login and a password and clicking and all of that. So they are requiring some digital literacy skills as well. School practices could also be new to them, sitting at a desk for a long period of time, working with other students in group like settings, even just eating in the cafeteria, lining up, going to gym class, going to music class, going to the library, even things such as taking turns might be new to them. So, in terms of, we have to really remember and remind ourselves that they're coming to a brand new culture, brand new language. Everything looks new and different. Even smells, the new foods, all of these things are very new to them. So there's a lot of things that are happening for our students even before we even get into the academic piece and the learning of the language. They can become overwhelmed by all that goes on in a classroom and what happens in a school on a regular basis. So noise might become too much. Fire drills and lockdown drills can become triggering and scary. Even just all the hustle and bustle of moving between classes, activity on the playground, and the buzz that might take place in the cafeteria, it can all become overwhelming and a bit much for students. This isn't to say that all students who come from refugee background are going to experience all of these things. These are just possibilities. So everyone is very different, and so how they react and respond will be different. It's just things to be mindful of, be aware of, keep in the back of your mind um, when you're working with these students. So, some of the traumatic events that they may have experienced would be death of a loved one or being separated from a loved one and not knowing their whereabouts. Maybe they've actually witnessed acts of violence or have been victims of active violence and abuse. Maybe they have faced very scary life threatening situations and have been living in a very unsafe and chaotic environment. So, all of these are very traumatic for anyone, um, especially youth. And so, what does that look like in terms of school performance? So, again, not applicable to all, but these are sort of trends that research shows have been experienced by students of refugee backgrounds. So, they may have lower grades, they may they may struggle to attend school on a regular basis. They're at an increased risk of dropping out of school, and they may have more suspensions. They also have challenges with reading and writing in English. They may or may not have literacy skills in their home language. Um, Students who are literate in their home language, they can use that as a support in learning English literacy skills. But if they don't have that in their home language, it makes learning to read and write in English um, far more challenging. And so, how can trauma affect the physical and emotional health of a child? So, it may present itself in different ways. They may experience headaches or stomach aches, not feeling well. They might have difficulty regulating their emotions. Their academic performance will be impacted. They may display impulsive behavior, or their behavior might be unpredictable, such as overreacting or underreacting to bells or physical contact, slamming doors, um, any kind of sudden movement, uh, or experiencing depression. So it's important to kind of be aware of some of these things that can present themselves. And so, how can it affect the physical and emotional health of a child? So, thinking about you know, reactions to different stimuli. They may have intense reactions because they might be very triggering and be a reminder of some of the um, things that they have experienced in the past. So they might become paranoid. They might think people are watching over them. Their reaction may not be relative to the situation. So, like I just said, it could be an overreaction to something or it could be an underreaction to something. They may struggle with relationships with authority figures. So they might become uncomfortable around people of authority. They might not know how to kind of resolve conflict in in a in a proper way to solve an issue. So they might act out in violence, and they might also experience difficulty with having change. So we'll talk about the importance of routines coming up. So, what are some unique issues that students or youth of refugee background face? Um, I just want to quote, this is from the Jan Stewart book, Supporting Refugee Students. Uh, and I want to really drive this point home as we get further into this webinar, is that teachers are not typically qualified counselors and are not expected to act as such. So the point of this information being shared is so that teachers are aware um, of some of the things to be paying attention to. So you're encouraged to understand and listen to your students and be able to recognize which indicators of mental health difficulties and adjustments might require support from a qualified professional. So we're going to look at things that you can do in your classroom or at the level of support you're giving a student. What are things that you can do? And then being able to acknowledge when a student needs support beyond what you can provide, and then going through the path to connect them with a mental health professional. So I just want to reiterate that the responsibility is not on you to act as a counselor because that is out of your scope of practice, but it is within your scope to be aware of indicators that they are presenting with and being able to acknowledge when they need more qualified support from a mental health professional. So, very key. Another thing that is key, and this is from Carol Salva, this is the Boosting Achievement author. I want to highlight the importance of this. These students have experienced a lack of opportunity and not an ability to learn. It is a lack of opportunity does not equate to cognitive delay. So sometimes students come to us and they don't have a lot of time before they finish high school and they have a lot of needs, and it can become daunting, and we kind of can get on that negative track of they can't do this, they won't be able to do that. But really we need to remind ourselves that it's a lack of opportunity and not that they can't learn. So those are kind of the two main messages for this webinar. So what are some unique issues that they might face or experience in terms of um, the school socialization process? So it is important for students to have knowledge and understanding of school culture and what some acceptable norms and behavior are. They might have trouble concentrating for long periods of time, and group work may be a very new concept to them. It should be very clear that consistent attendance, so coming to school on a very regular basis, is encouraged, and that might need to be explicitly explained to students and families. They need to be aware of what the appropriate role is between the teacher and student, what that relationship looks like, and they should also be made aware of discipline policies and that violence is never ever tolerated. Um, the other thing, especially at the secondary level, is they need to be explicitly told the significance of getting their high school diploma. Um, I know that a lot of high school students can become very overwhelmed and disengaged at the content, at the requirements to graduate. Sometimes their priorities are to work and to make money to support their family. But nevertheless, we have to support them and understanding the need or the importance of having a high school diploma in Canada. So when we look at the unique academic issues, they may have experienced interrupted education or have not attended school at all, and they might require basic skills in reading and writing. So it's important to know if these students can read and write in their home language. There will be gaps in content knowledge just because of lack of experiences and opportunities. Maybe they haven't been going to school on a regular basis. And then they will require information of the expectations and the requirements for coming into school. So this can also be challenging. So we have to kind of make this information accessible to students. Um, what is required of a student in our school system? So what do they need to graduate? What courses do they need to take? What happens if they fail? Who do they reach out to for certain issues? So it's really about um, keeping them informed as best we can. Some of the social issues that they may face is not having access to appropriate clothing or school supplies. So, um, do they have proper clothing for all 4 seasons? Are they dressed warmly in the winter? Do they have, appropriate clothing for the summer? They might need support with cultural adjustments, and they might need to be connected to outside agencies that can provide support to the students and to the families. So, Schools Plus, YMCA, School Settlement, and the YRH, um, very valuable resources that can provide support to them or can connect them to appropriate supports. And I know that there is a strong collaboration piece also happening between Schools Plus and the YMCA School Settlements team. So, great resources to have. Students might need help making new friends, navigating relationships, not really understanding different behaviors that they might see living in a new culture. And what are some implications that they might face living in poverty, possibly living in poverty? And they may also be experiencing being victims of racism or anti-immigrant beliefs. So, what does that look like? How does that present itself? And do the students know how to navigate that if they do find themselves in this type of situation? Do they know who to turn to, and also to be advocating for themselves? When we look at mental and physical health issues that these students may experience, um, does that family or the individual need some grief counseling? I know that there are some cultural differences that might come along with this, but nevertheless, um, it is something that could be discussed. Have they been were they a victim of violence? They may be experiencing a change in family roles. Sometimes when students come, uh, if their English language, their conversational language develops faster than their parents, they might find themselves acting as an interpreter for their family. Maybe they're having to engage in conversations that are not necessarily appropriate for youth. Maybe they're having to make decisions um, that typically they wouldn't have had to have made. Maybe they're taking on a more caregiver role. Maybe they're having to get a job and help support the family. So it's really layered what these families are going through. Upon arrival, they might be going for a lot of checkups, a lot of appointments with the dentist. So in terms of vision screenings, hearing tests, dental. Maybe they need to have some follow-up doctor's appointments. Are they all caught up with their vaccinations? Some of this would happen prior to coming to Canada, and then there would be follow-ups again once they've arrived. Thinking about some counseling to help them deal with PTSD, and also providing students with some conflict resolution strategies. So again, some may need this, some may not, but it's just about bringing awareness to some of the things that they do face. So, what can you as teachers do? So, very important to maintain routines and give choice when possible. So, not only does this keep students engaged when it's something that is meaningful to them, but it also, in terms of students with refugee background, gives them a sense of control and a feeling of power that they do have some say in the decision. That can go a long way. Increased level of support and encouragement. So be very positive um, and encouraging towards them. It's also important that you be able to recognize behavior problems that may be a result of stimuli. So are you starting to notice patterns that a student will act a certain way after something? I don't know, whether it be a loud sound, a drill, chaotic, an outburst in the class. I don't know, but it's important to kind of keep track of reactions or behaviors that might follow certain events. be sensitive to the cues that might be triggering certain behaviors and reactions, and also helping others gain sensitivity. So we don't want to be singling students out, but we want to be kind of doing it in a more natural way. So whether that be through some of the material you use, some of the, if you're doing read alouds, if you're reading a storybook, if you're, having guest speakers in, it's just also too about, you know, providing exposure, I guess, to students to learn more about what new students have faced and where they're coming from. Making academic work accessible and giving these students opportunity to feel a sense of accomplishment and taking ownership on some of the work they have done. So really trying to get in and make some of that work accessible and making it make sense to students so that they can start to complete some of the work. So when working with students of refugee backgrounds, all right. So it's very important to be culturally responsive. So we've had a lot of PD over the last number of years around the importance of being responsive to the changing cultures and linguistic abilities of our students. So we have to really be committed to creating a safe and interactive environment for language learning and setting them up to achieve academically. We want to be positive towards students from diverse cultures. And we want to be able to identify and promote equitable schooling for students of cultural and diverse backgrounds. Um, we also want to look at some instructional supports that can be put into place to support them with their academics. Be interested in learning about their backgrounds and really try to refrain from having a deficit mindset of they can't, they won't. But we really want to be positive and have high expectations for our students. Culturally responsive teaching goes beyond the superficial level of having posters on the wall, acknowledging different holidays, doing worksheets, and then having students bring in food. We really want to be um, showing that we are aware of our learners by the material that you choose. So if you're doing a novel study, have different novels available for students to choose from. Have diverse posters on the wall. Think about the examples that you're using, and just really thinking about the strengths of the students and the backgrounds that they come with, and how can we include that in our teaching to make it relevant. So we want to value the home language to support our students. So even if it means just learning a few basic words in their language, it always gets a smile out of them. So a hello, a thank you, a goodbye goes a long way. We want to be respectful of the values that they hold. So while we may not know explicitly what those are, we can't make assumptions that because students come from the same country or have the same language, that their traditions are exactly the same or that their customs are exactly the same. So we want to really get to know our students. So we can do this through team building activities. Maybe you want to do a survey, even just through simple conversations. You can really glean a lot of valuable information from just stopping and having a chat. And in the beginning days, in the early days, it's okay if that is with the use of a translator. Um, so, not new news, but when students feel safe and welcomed, they're going to adapt quicker and they're going to be able to kind of open up their minds to learning and to be kind of transitioning into being ready to academically progress. So thinking about all that they face, um, in terms of understanding their new culture and acquiring language and content materials, um, when they feel safe and respected, these other things come a lot easier. So it's also very important to have high expectations for these students. We're going to turn now to perseverance and growth mindset. So, Dr. Carol Salva is a huge supporter in this. And so she does talk about it in her book, Boosting Achievement. So it's important to not hold them back from trying. I know that I've had a few students come and say, Miss, I want to go into the harder math, or I want to try English 10 now. I'm ready, Miss, I'm ready. So it's not up to us to deny them from that opportunity. If they are making progress and they feel that they are confident enough in their own abilities to do that, to try something, then we need to be supportive of that, and we need to have some proper supports in place to help them be successful. It's important to be motivating, to motivate them and learn what they're passionate about. So teaching them about the importance of growth mindset, to set goals, that it's okay to learn from mistakes, and that, with everything that they try and everything that they practice, they will continue to get better and progress. If you do have older students, sometimes time is working against them. However, they tend to be more mature. And so they might have a better awareness of, I really need to make the time here count. And that can be a motivator for some. So I've mentioned before having high expectations. So I've met so many students over my career that have just been so grateful. I want to go to school, Miss. I'm so happy to be in school. I'm finally in school. So this is something that we just take for granted. It's just a known thing. You turn 4 or 5, you go to school till you're 18. This is a huge privilege to a lot of these students, and they're very eager to learn. So it's important to have that in mind and explicitly tell them how powerful growth mindset can be. They already have a lot of these characteristics to overcome obstacles, to keep going, and it is a strong predictor of success. However, we have to also not sugarcoat it, and they have to know that positive attitude isn't enough. They do need to work hard, and they do need to have support, and that's okay. So, and support can come in different ways. It could be technology support, it could be teacher support, it could be support from home language, and just, opportunities. Another thing that goes a long way is sharing examples of success. So, whether that be former students, I know. There's the adult language program at the community college for students to learn English and graduate with a high school diploma. And some of the high schools have brought back former students to talk about what a positive experience it has been. Maybe there's an entrepreneur in the community that was once a refugee and has now made something for themselves. So I think tapping into some of the successes in the community really has high impact for, overcoming challenges, establishing and reaching a goal, and experiencing a sense of accomplishment. So we're going to move on now to teaching practices. So what are some of the things that you can do to support students who may or may not have literacy in their home language? So I think it's important for all teachers to realize that they are language teachers, and just the importance of creating a language rich environment where you're using a lot of academic language, where there's a lot of cooperative learning opportunities taking place. I don't know if I'm going to speak ahead of myself or not, but um, there's an abundance of research that talks about the importance of cooperative learning opportunities for students. And 2 years ago, we did a newcomer youth survey. And one of the major kind of trends that came out of that, or themes that came out of that, was the fact that they love group work. It helps them meet friends. It helps them meet friends from Canada, they say. It helps them understand. It teaches them new words. So it was really sort of validating or confirming when you read all of this research and all of these theories, but then to actually hear students in our schools saying that they value it as well, it was very reaffirming. So sometimes I know teachers have shared that, oh, they feel awkward, they put them with other like similar language speaking students, or they didn't know, they just feel like the person feels out of place or they don't know anyone. But for the most part, um, it is a value. It might be a little bit more awkward in the beginning, but over time, stick with it, and it's more benefit than not. Corley reads something every day. So whether that be something very, very simple in terms of a goal or an I can statement, to sentence frames or vocabulary. So it could be whatever you want, but just Corley reads something every day so that they can make that connection between spoken word and written word. Have visuals that you can refer to throughout the lesson. And again, in terms of some practice that you could be doing every day, a student should write at least one academic sentence in English every day. So again, that could be supported by a sentence frame. So you're going to give them like the prompt. So be repetitive in your speech and use synonyms. Uh, Anyone who knows me, this is kind of like my number one go-to simple, no planning tip that is worth its weight in gold. Give the academic word with the easy word. So I once had a student say, Miss, give me the cheap word. Give me the cheap word. She goes, that's the expensive word and I need it, but I need the cheap word too to help me understand. So using synonyms, give that academic word, but also piggyback it with the easy word. So what is the role or job of the digestive system? Oh, I see you're injured or hurt. So this is helping all students, and it's helping EAL students develop their vocabulary. And over time, the more exposure, then the richer their vocabulary becomes. Cooperative learning opportunities or activities. I did get ahead of myself in terms of, yes, students are themselves saying it's a worthwhile. Gestures are very, very important, and they can go a long way. You can use gestures to indicate the location of something, the temperature, the size of something, the shape of something. Maybe you could do a quick little act out, depending on what the term is, using oral translation if possible, and then also using, other peers who speak the same language as a support. So some of the teaching practices, environmental print. So an opportunity to create these together. Maybe you want to refer to their community or their home country. I've done it a couple different ways. I have created environmental print, sort of like an alphabet linking chart, which is this middle image here. Where you can do things even from around town. So if the student's from Clayton Park, maybe you want to do Canada Game Center, maybe you want to do the BMO Soccer Center or the Sobeys or the Walmart, Dollarama. I've also reached out to families and asked for popular stores or toys or whatnot from a student's home country that we can incorporate into a linking chart. Here is an anchor chart for math, and we've got lots of great visuals here. Very impactful if you were to create this together as a class. And we've got one over here for science as well. So this is linked. So you'll see this in your slide deck. It goes to an article about the importance of environmental print. So how to use it, some examples, and some activities that can go along with the use of environmental print. So really big fan of of the impact environmental print can have on developing students' alphabet awareness. Oh, did I hit? No. All right. So some other teaching practices, if we think about beginner level students or pre-beginner level students, they can do things such as copying, writing out lists, labeling pictures, drawing something. Give students time, I should say, to practice and really internalize the new skills or words that they're learning. Give students sentence stems when they're going to be working with a partner. And I do have some down below, but these are a few teaching practices that are highly recommended. So this is the picture word inductive model. And there's some background information on it, but essentially you're going to select an image. And we're going to look at some of the vocabulary for some of the items or objects that are in this image. So we can see there's a wolf and a deer and a squirrel and a fish and a turtle. This looks like a little pond, a forest, a mountain, what have you. And then you're going to label the nouns in one color. So you're going to be showing how to draw the label. You're going to be pointing the arrows towards the object. Maybe you want to, you could teach them how to spell the word the capital letter. Maybe you want to be sounding out wolf and tree. Anyhow, you're going to be labeling them with just the nouns. And then you can build on that, and then you can label the verb. So what are these animals doing? And so this is some academic vocabulary, but the squirrel consumes, the squirrel eats, or the wolf preys, the wolf hunts. And so maybe if you want to also have, have these words translated or whatnot, but the bush produces, the bush makes berries, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so then we've got the verbs, and then you're going to create a full sentence. So maybe you just want to label it with just nouns. It really depends on your students. And this is, really, I guess, layered in terms of how far you want to go based on the proficiency levels of your students. But then you can add on to those sentences. And then the next final step might be to take this information and then put it into a paragraph. So again, highly recommend this, this instructional practice. Sentence frames. This is just a one-page document. I love this document. It gives you examples for beginning language level, intermediate, and advanced. And then it talks about, are you going to be categorizing? Are you going to be checking for? Are you going to be summarizing cause and effect? So it gives you some different sentence frames for different tasks, I guess, or things to focus on. So this will be linked in the slide deck. And I've got paragraph frames. This document's a little bit longer. I think it's like 78 pages long, but it's very well organized and it is a very good resource to have. And it does give you different examples of framed paragraphs in terms of just a generic paragraph. Are you going to be writing a conclusion? Are you going to be making a prediction? Are you going to be doing compare and contrast, author's purpose, problem solution? So it's very well laid out. So I highly recommend this as well because that's a great benefit to really all students, but especially those learning English. And then the roving paragraph frame. This is similar. It's kind of, you're going to give them, your group of students a sentence to start with, and then it's very interactive. So they're going to go around and be completing the sentences with a partner. And then, they'll complete the next sentence in the paragraph frame. And when they've done that, then they move on to another student to complete the next sentence in a paragraph frame. So they're kind of like roaming around the room. So it is very collaborative. They are, working with different students. They are engaging in, they're immersed in English. And then they'll end up with a completed paragraph. And then they have to write it out, maybe in a better copy, practice reading, making sense of it, talking about it. And then at this time, it also creates an opportunity for the teacher to be working with the students who are brand new to English. So maybe you want to do them with a small group. Maybe this is the time that the EAL teacher is present when you're doing this, and either that frees you up to work with your EAL students, or the EAL teacher does, and then you're monitoring the larger group. Anyhow, there's different ways that you can make that work for you. The language experience approach, also, I highly, highly recommend this. It's a great way to be teaching writing and reading. So it's basically, you're going to have a shared experience. So whether that be a project that you've done, a trip you've taken, a guest speaker, a passage, what have you, it's something that you've done as a group. Excuse me. And the students are going to discuss the experience in their own words. And as they are sharing with you about the topic, you are writing what they're saying. So you could do this on the board, you could do this on the LCD. And this way, they are being able to see their words connected to the written word. So the spoken word connected to the written word. And then after that has been done, the teacher will read it aloud. Then you'll chorally read it as a group. And then they could read, you could take it a step further. They could read with a partner and then read independently. Maybe you want to give them different tasks for when they're reading. So maybe you want to be looking at paying attention to phonics or word families, appropriate punctuation. Maybe you want them to be reading with, practicing their expression and intonation. And then they will have a piece of writing that then they can use as an example for when it's their turn to be doing some independent writing. So I do have it linked to 2 other sites for further reading if you're interested, but this is very effective practice. All right, and then we have literacy approaches. So there's read aloud, shared reading, guided reading, independent reading, and then we flip over to the same version, but for writing: write aloud, shared writing, guided writing, and independent writing. I do have it linked to a document to explain the difference of all of these. You might be a new teacher, you might be a new EAL teacher. You're hearing all these terms and not necessarily knowing what each approach actually looks like. So there's a document here that you can refer to. Also, it's a great time to plug my other webinar, which is supporting reading and writing with EAL students. So we really get into more in depth what each approach looks like and how it is so beneficial to EAL students. So that is in another webinar. And then we just have additional resources and information here if you're interested. Bow Valley College in Calgary has an English school, and they have developed some early literacy readers for adults or young adults. The same for this resource group in Ontario. It is not just a local issue, it is a worldwide issue. that there is a real lack of appropriate materials to teach adults how to read. So a lot of times it's recommended to be using student created materials. And that's exactly what these literacy readers are out of Bow Valley College. They had young adult and adult literacy learners, and they created their own books. So, Food from Home, if we look at this PDF version, now it won't come in order because I think you have to print it off and put it together, but this one might work better. Mary buys tea. Oh, Mary buys cake. So the image is kind of small. But anyhow, these were student created materials because we have to. There's not a lot out there. A lot of the literacy level readers that, they're for elementary school, and so they're cartoons, or they're very juvenile looking, or the people featured in the books are quite young. So that's one way, is to be using student created materials. There is a link to a virtual conference. It's a SLIFE conference, but I just do want to make note that in Canada and Nova Scotia, we don't call students that have experienced interrupted learning SLIFE. This is an American term, and it stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. I am recently starting to see a shift in this language. Some of them are now being called experienced multilinguals. But I think in terms of Nova Scotia, if we were to qualify, maybe if we had to put a label on it, it might be EAL literacy. So that kind of indicates that they are EAL students, but there also is a literacy component that they need more support in developing. So I believe that is it. I just want to thank you again for spending time to develop your learning and awareness of how we can support students learning English, especially with refugee background. Thank you for what you're doing to support our students and for, again, taking the time. If you have any questions, it's Leanne Brownell at lbrownell@hrce.ca. Thank you.